Poor productivity was a recurring theme in the OECD's review of the UK economy. The organisation, which advises industrial countries on economic policy, kept UK growth forecasts for 2017 and 2018 unchanged at 1.6 and 1% respectively. And as the Brexit deadline of March 2019 approaches, the OECD advised the UK to keep the EU a friend and not a foe.
It will be crucial that the UK and the EU maintain the closest economic relationship possible.
After deliberating over dinner Monday evening, UK Prime Minister Theresa May and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker issued a statement saying Brexit efforts needed to move faster. But unless the UK offers progress on a figure of the divorce bill, the rights of EU citizens and the Irish border, Europe says negotiations are unlikely to go any further. The OECD says a hard Brexit, one without a deal, will cost the UK $52 billion in lost growth. The UK agrees the nuclear option would be bad for both sides.
Avoiding a disruptive cliff edge exit from the EU, we can provide greater certainty for businesses up and down the UK and across the European Union. And that certainty, the ability to plan ahead, to make contracts, to invest, will support the investment that will drive the productivity gains of the future.
But the OECD says cancelling Brexit altogether would have a positive impact on the British economy. Not really what Brexiteers want to hear, especially with EU leaders, excluding May, gathering in Brussels on Thursday for a two-day meeting. Adefemi Akinsanya, TRT World.
Now, for more analysis, Vicky Pryce, economist and board member of the Centre for Economics and Business Research, joins us now from London. Thanks so much for joining us, Vicky. Now, the OECD, let me get this out right, the OECD mentioned long-term decline if the UK and the EU don't stay close. Do you agree? And would this be 2008 crisis levels all over again?
I think most economists agree that leaving the EU without a proper deal and reverting to World Trade Organization rules would be pretty bad for the economy. If you look at any other scenario, anything that keeps us much closer to the EU along the lines of what the OECD is saying, but in particular if we're able to be members of the single market, customs union and so on, those types of options would be very much welcomed by business, and any models that have been run on the economy suggest that we would be doing a lot better than exiting without a deal. So the discussion about not having a deal has been reduced recently, but not disappeared completely. And there are loads of people on the Brexit side who still cling to the belief that actually we can do really well if we're outside the EU and have a clean break, which we all know, the OECD tells us, the IMF tells us, most economists tell us, businesses tell us, would actually be disastrous for the UK.
And on that, how likely is a second referendum, and who's calling for one, if at all?
It's really interesting what's going on right now. What you're beginning to see is that public opinion is moving. The newspapers here are absolutely full of Brexit stories, negative Brexit stories. Today we had very high inflation figures, which of course are undermining disposable incomes because of course the pound has been falling as a result of the referendum vote. So what you have got is some sort of concern emerging even among people who voted to leave, and there are opinion polls which are now beginning to indicate that people are moving in their views, and people who want to remain are sort of gaining a little bit there. It hasn't become completely solid yet. But what you found is that both the Prime Minister very recently was asked whether she would vote to remain again if there was a second referendum, said she couldn't really answer it, she'd have to wait, which everyone interpreted to mean that she would want to vote remain, probably. And then the leader of the opposition said he would do the same, he would vote remain. What this suggests is that there is something happening. I don't think we can have a second referendum now. Parliament will have to exercise its rights to veto any deal if they don't like it. But you never know. I think it might take a bit of time, but we might find we get to 2019 with no real agreement. We have a transition period that is longer than people perhaps anticipate, and maybe at the end a vote again to look at the deal and possibly stay. It's not impossible. For the moment, it doesn't look fantastically likely, but the mood is beginning to change.
The mood is beginning to change and not impossible. Very interesting. But what about the Sun and the Daily Mail? Are they beginning to change at all? Because I know they were so... they do not like the word remain at all.
It's interesting. Even the Daily Mail has begun to write some sort of negative stories about Brexit. And even the Telegraph, which is another very conservative newspaper, is also having quite a lot of comments pages which are suggesting that people are beginning to get concerned about the implications of this. It's taken a long time. We don't seem to have a plan. So far, what we've done is we've given in to what the Europeans have asked. We may not have decided what the divorce bill will be, but we've certainly given in terms of the sequencing of discussions. We've given in terms of the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, possibly having a role in the transition period. We softened our stance on the EU residents, not completely. We may not have got a figure yet of what we may be prepared to pay, but we made clear we're prepared to pay something. So we are certainly giving way, but we're giving way in such a way which cleverly, I think, is keeping the Brexiters more or less happy. But in fact, we're capitulating. And the question is, how far more can we capitulate before perhaps there is some revolt in the cabinet? And we know there are disagreements there. We haven't sorted those out. There may still be a coup against Theresa May, who knows? But for the moment, what we've got is certainly an attempt to get to some agreement over
Vicky,
the next few years, but in a way
thank you so much
doesn't
for
kill
that.
businesses completely.
Vicky Pryce, board member at the Centre for Economics and Business Research in London, for us there.